Hello, and thank you for joining us for this very special interview. We're going to be discussing a relatively new and rather innovative product that's here in the United States, Curodont by vVardis. Please note this webinar is for informational purposes only. The information contained in this webinar has been researched as of the publishing date and is not to be considered legal advice or a guarantee of insurance reimbursement. I'm Dr. Greg Grobmyer. I was a clinically practicing dentist for over a decade in Tennessee. I went through a cancer battle when I was only 36, and that kind of took me out of the clinical part. I ended up with peripheral neuropathy from the chemotherapy, had to shift over into coaching and consulting practices for a long time, and began writing for the dental industry. But that eventually led me to work with Dr. Charles Blair. I have now taken over the responsibilities that he once had, writing the Dental Coding with Confidence manual. I rewrite that thing every year. It takes me 3 months to write 560 pages of material. And then I spend the rest of the year coaching, consulting, and speaking about those CDT code changes and updates. And in that process, it was 2 years ago, I guess, now, really 3 when I first heard about it, that I was introduced to the concept of Curodont. I thought it was very novel. It was very interesting and innovative. I hadn't really heard of anything quite like it before, and so I was curious where they were going to put it in the CDT code set. The interesting thing to me is that it did not fall into the preventive category of service. It specifically was put as a restorative, which is a lot different than almost anything else that's on the market currently. And so we're going to talk about the particulars about that, about where it falls, what type of material it is, where it works, the studies that are behind it. And I have the pleasure of being able to interview a couple of the great minds behind Curodont, people who have been working with it and are very familiar with it. They've got a lot of information for us today. So the first is Adriana Forino. Adriana is a dental hygienist. She's in New York State. She's got experience both with clinical care and dental operations. She's a former founder of a women in dentistry community and an ADHA speaker on mental health. She joined vVardis in 2024, and she is passionate about sharing the power of biomimetic dental solutions. I also have the pleasure of speaking with Divya Naik. She is the Global Clinical Scientific Affairs Manager at vVardis, which is based in Switzerland. After specializing in prosthodontics and implantology, practicing for some years in India, she transferred to working with vVardis, where she's been for 4 years. Her role is kind of at the crossroads of scientific affairs, research and development, innovation, marketing, training, education. She does a little bit of it all. And besides the scientific communication and analysis, a lot of her work focuses on cross-functional collaboration with diverse projects ranging from clinical trials to engaging with prominent thought leaders and universities, tackling a lot of questions in the field. So really simply put, she brings the clinical perspective to scientific discussions to ensure that vVardis' technology is implemented by the clinicians in the field in the easiest and most efficient manner possible. Again, I got exposed to this probably back in 2023 when there was a code proposal for a code change that came through the ADA's Code Maintenance Committee. I get to sit in on all those conversations when these codes are discussed and voted upon. And there was a lot of back and forth about this particular product and where it should fit and how it should best be implemented into the code set. And so with that voting, I think it came into the CDT code set in 2024. And that's where it lives now, but it's notable because it's in the restorative category of service. It's not a preventive, like things that are for arresting decay or for primary prevention, like fluorides. And so this is truly unique, and I find it fascinating the way that it works. So Divya, tell me a little bit about vVardis and Curodont. What is Curodont? How long has the product been around? How is it best used? Things like that.
Thank you, Dr. Greg. First of all, it's great being here with my colleague, Adri. vVardis is, as you said, a Switzerland-based healthcare company that was founded by 2 Swiss dentists who are also, in fact, sisters, Dr. Haley and Dr. Goli Abiwardi. The science that vVardis is based on is robust, and it's backed by almost more than 25 years of research. In the EU, the products that are based on the vVardis technology have been implemented successfully and safely for about 10 years now, more than 10 years now. In the US, our star product, Curodont Repair Fluoride Plus, it was introduced, I would say, a few years ago, but it has grown leaps and bounds since then. Simply put, Curodont is a non-invasive biomimetic treatment of early stage caries, right? So we are speaking non-cavitated carious lesions that are largely limited to the enamel. These kind of lesions did not really have a targeted, precise treatment, right? That was meant for these kind of lesions. We either had, well, a majority of these lesions were either, kept under observation in what we refer to as the wait and watch approach, or sometimes, they were drilled into and a restoration was done. Curodont is a drug-free treatment that is targeted for these kind of lesions. It is a treatment that penetrates the surface, diffuses throughout the lesion body, and generates new hydroxyapatite. It's gained a lot of traction very, very quickly, so much so that it was the fastest growing dental product in its category in recent dental history. We also know that over 1 million teeth have been treated using Curodont in a little over 18 months. And that kind of, shows us that the dental community was probably waiting for such a kind of solution with the kind of implementation that we've seen across our markets, right? And we've also received wonderful feedback from clinicians who share their cases with us all the time. And based on this feedback, we've recently introduced, I'm sure Adri will tell you more about it, but we've recently introduced a new generation of the product, which keeps the same tried and tested formula, but we've just made the design more intuitive for clinicians and the application procedure just easier and faster for clinicians to implement in just like the 3 minutes of chair time.
It really is kind of different than anything else that is out there because, I mean, for years and years, even in my clinical practice, when we see the little etches that are on the teeth and they're not deep enough to warrant actually destroying that marginal ridge, once that is cut, you have really taken away a lot of the integrity of the naturally occurring strength of that tooth. And so begins that process, that spiral kind of, you're doing a filling, and then that filling may end up, as it is replaced or fails, it has to be replaced by a larger filling and eventually a crown, eventually a root canal. The moment you touch a burr to a tooth and do an invasive treatment, it begins the slow cycle of replacement and continuous care for the life of that patient. Prevention is fantastic, but once these lesions are there, we haven't really had a great choice in how to attack that or fix that. And so we're writing watch in the chart, and we're just watching those lesions get bigger until we finally cut that marginal ridge. So this is unique. This is interesting. It doesn't just arrest decay or stop it like silver diamine fluoride, SDF. This actually fills the hole back in, essentially, with naturally occurring hydroxyapatite, mimicking the actual tooth structure that was originally there. And I think that's fascinating. And so, Adrian, just tell me a little bit about your experience with it and what makes Curodont so unique, so different.
Yeah. So with my experience with Curodont, it's really fascinating actually, because prior to joining the vVardis family, I was a hygienist, part of a DSO, who was one of the first to launch Curodont Repair Fluoride Plus within the organization. And so not only was I a clinical practicing hygienist at that time, but I was also in operations leading, gosh, I had over 370 providers that I was supporting at that time.
Wow,
And
that's
being
huge.
able, yes, it was huge. And being able to be the voice and the advocate to be able to share this solution with so many providers, it was truly amazing. And so being able to implement this within those practices, providers were excited. Just as you mentioned, Dr. Greg, we didn't have a solution like this prior, where, as Divya mentioned, it was either that observation method, right? Or we would prep early. And both of those options that doctors have, they both technically have risks to them, right? And so now this was a solution that allowed providers to be able to treat caries early and get to the root of the problem. So the providers that I supported at that time, they were very excited. And within that organization, it became a movement very early on where we were sharing with patients, hey, typically we would have said, you have a spot, we see it's a little suspicious. We're going to watch this and see in 6 months if it's the same or if we need to do something different to it. And the clinicians were now able to say to the patients, hey, great news. We can treat this early in a drill-free, needle-free manner. And the patients were excited about that too.
If I'm correct, I believe there's some practices out there that are completely running kind of a early intervention type practice. This is their primary mode of restorative within their practices. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. I know Divya could probably speak to this a little bit more too about the protocols that doctors are starting to put together where non-invasive dentistry is truly their leading course of treatment.
Even in the EU, for example, where I am based, we have clinics that are solely based on prevention and then early intervention. When we think about caries as a disease, we do think that in the past few decades, the prevalence has slowly been reducing. But if you actually go into the literature and look at it, caries prevalence rates have kind of plateaued in the last, I would say, 2 decades or so. Almost all of these studies or prevalence studies that are available, they're tracking cavitated lesions. Even major health authorities, WHO, CDC, etc., if they put out statistics, those are for cavitated lesions. But based on the little literature that does exist, if you track early stage caries, up to 80% of patients that walk into the clinic and sit on your dental chair can have these early stage caries. And since they are asymptomatic, right, these are lesions that are not cavitated, so there's no real pain or food entrapment or those classical things you associate with cavities that, patients complain about. And a lot of these lesions are on the interproximal surfaces. So I feel the dental community has kind of been unaware that all of these lesions have existed and are existing. And there is no way for you to tell which of these are going to progress and turn into cavities, whether your patient is going to come back. So the message that we go out with, and a lot of clinicians really identify with, is that you go behind these lesions proactively, right? Like you would do with any other systemic disease, right? You notice those early signs, you go behind them. You don't keep them under observation. We go behind them. We take proactive measures and solve these things. And early stage caries are kind of these subclinical signs, I would say, of the caries disease process. And it's about time that we went after these lesions, right? Rather than wait until it turns into something irreversible. And then what you do is kindly patchwork, isn't it? To restore form, function, and aesthetics. But it's not giving you back what you lost, which was hydroxyapatite.
Exactly. We're going back and filling it in with resin, which is, not a naturally recurring material. It does have a tendency to fail over time. There is a, kind of life cycle on that. And so it's so much better to actually be putting back what was naturally there. And then we can work towards making sure that the caries are not recurrent going forward. There are some great studies that have recently come out that I did want to make sure that we touch on. I know Dental Advisor really had a great study recently with the scanning electron microscope images that were showing growth of new crystalline structure within even 2 weeks after the initial application. Curodont, just to be said, it's not an overnight fix, unlike placing a filling or pumping something full of resin. This does take time, and it is not actually a hydroxyapatite containing medicament, unlike some others that are on the market that are slathering stuff on the surface and having a superficial reaction. This is actually penetrating into the depth of the lesion and regrowing new crystalline hydroxyapatite from depth, which due to that formulation, its low viscosity, it penetrates and disperses throughout the lesion. And that's why it is a restorative. It is returning the tooth to form and function. It is not just stopping or arresting decay and preventing it from growing. It is actually putting it back the way that it was, which I think is absolutely fantastic. Would you speak a little bit to these studies that have recently come out in the literature and what they have shown?
Yes, absolutely. So the study that you mentioned, that I would say is the most recent study that came out that Dental Advisor did. This was an in vitro study that used both micro-CT and scanning electron microscopy to evaluate lesions that were treated with Curodont. The testing was done 2 weeks after the treatment. And the micro-CT analysis actually showed significant increase in mineral density throughout the depth of the lesion. So what they did is they actually measured the increase in mineral density at different depths in this lesion. And they found that the increase in mineral density at each of these depths, say 20 microns, 50 microns, and then the full depth of the lesion, was uniform, which kind of tells us that the effect that Curodont is giving you is not just surface level. It is in depth and throughout the depth. So it's filling up the body of the lesion and kind of returning the tooth back to what it used to be, rather than just a superficial remineralizing effect that we see with some of the other technologies that are out there. Of course, this was only a 2-week long study, and we are in talks to have studies that extend a little bit more, which will give us a much more in-depth, insightful picture on what is happening within these lesions. But even within 2 weeks, we could see larger hydroxyapatite crystals in the depth of these lesions, whereas there were areas that were completely fused with sound enamel. So this was a really great study. It is available on the Dental Advisor website for anyone to read, look at the pictures, etc. And then there were a couple of others. These are more case reports / case series that have been published by two of our very robust users, right? We call them curodontists. One of them is by Dr. Adam. He's a pediatric dentist. He's been a user of Curodont for quite some time, and he shared really great feedback with us. He's shared a lot of cases with us as well. The article he's published, it's out in Decisions in Dentistry. And well, through this article, he's actually putting forth a proposal of a protocol that he's devised in his practice. He calls it the Innovative Proactive Enamel Repair Protocol. The core principle of this protocol is early diagnosis and then early intervention therapy using Curodont. So he's devised this 3-tiered diagnostic system, right, with artificial intelligence, chance elimination, and then localized pH assessment, all of which he combines together to diagnose as many early stage lesions as possible, as early as possible. And then the therapeutic foundation of this protocol is Curodont. And he goes in and he treats these lesions as soon as they are diagnosed, a lot of times in the same appointment. And then he shares a couple of cases in the article as well. A really interesting insight he provides is how Curodont, of course, has produced great results clinically for his patients, but has also had such a positive impact on the growth of his practice. And in addition to that, just to generate this positive outlook towards dental professionals in his patients who are pretty much the pediatric population. And we know that dental anxiety and fear are such a major issue in the pediatric population, and pediatric dentists spend a lot of their appointment time in behavior modification. And therapies like Curodont have really helped him encourage his young patients to be more excited to be at the dentist's, right? And then the third one is from Dr. Lohman, Dr. Leila Lohman, who's also been a long-time Curodont user. She's based in Dallas. She's a general dentist and she heads a chain of dental clinics. In her article, she has been using AI in her practice for quite some time, and also Curodont. She shares around 4 cases, all of them with diverse clinical presentations with diverse conditions. For example, there is a case with an adolescent boy, not very good with oral hygiene maintenance, a diet that is typical of adolescents, high sugar-rich, acidic beverages, etc. And then there's another case with a lady who has Sjogren's syndrome. So, she suffers from xerostomia, and then she shows the use of Curodont in all of these patients and the great results that she's seen. She's someone who adopts new technologies really, really fast. She's one of those early adopters, and she's done hundreds and hundreds of cases with Curodont. And this article shows like a few of them. But yeah, we are really excited about all of these articles that have come out recently, and just the pace at which newer studies and newer articles are coming out, the feedback that we are receiving. Yeah, we're really happy, really excited about all of these things that are coming out.
Tell me a little bit about the integration of Curodont and some of the things that your doctors that you've helped kind of integrate this into their workflows. What is their response? How are they feeling about this?
Yeah, the doctors are very excited, again, because they have that solution to now be able to treat these lesions in the earliest stage. Because of it being a product that we didn't have before, right, or a solution we didn't have before, being able to help doctors integrate this into their standard of care is really important. And honestly, dialing it back to the basics of, okay, doctor, share with me what kind of lesions you would typically monitor before doing a restorative intervention for. and being able to get that nitty-gritty information to be able to cascade that information to their team, because team alignment is really big with this too. Early identification of lesions can come from all team members, right? We can all look for those types of suspicious lesions and bring them to our doctor's attention and just simply ask, hey, doctor, I saw this area. Would you like to recommend Curodont for this spot? Or would you like to prescribe Curodont for this area? So that the patients can hear that word prescribe. They know that it's holding value to what the doctor is talking about, right? And so it truly does take a team approach to be able to integrate Curodont, but it starts with that foundational piece of going back to lesion identification and having that team alignment of what we are looking for.
Speaking of the team, it's not just the doctor that can apply Curodont. That's one of the great things that I find about this. This is one of the few places where a hygienist can do a restorative procedure.
Yeah, that's correct. So as a hygienist, I've placed Curodont myself, and it is exciting. As a hygienist, we have our procedures that we do day in and day out, whether I'm updating an FMX or doing a prophy, an SRP on a patient. And to be able to actually have another service that I could provide to my patients, it brought a spark back to me, because I already am so passionate about early intervention of the soft tissue management, right? Now I was able to participate in early treatment of the hard tissue management in a non-invasive way.
Really, the only thing we've had up until this point is just SDF or an arresting type medicament to put on there, which is not restorative. It is purely stopping decay where it is and preventing further growth, but there's still a divot in the tooth. There's still a lesion that is present. It's just not growing any further than it is. That still traps food. That still kind of has a tendency to catch floss, things like that. It's a roughness on the surface of the tooth. And the only other options prior to this was invasive restorative treatments, where we're actually going in and cutting a marginal ridge to be able to get these interproximal lesions. That's taking a huge amount of healthy tooth structure just for purposes of being able to get to where the lesion is. And so that's an unfortunate consequence, but that was really the only choice that doctors had once that decay got to a certain level. Now we have this non-invasive restorative material, which I think is just absolutely amazing. I'm loving it. So Divya, where do you see the future of this type of product in dentistry?
Like I mentioned before, right? Untreated caries are the most prevalent non-communicable disease worldwide. And this is only when we are looking at cavitated lesions. There's still this huge global burden. If you bring early stage caries into the equation, the number just blows up. It's this, I feel, this mountain of disease that we've been sitting on and not really going in and treating. The way Curodont is growing and the kind of conversations we are having with clinicians, I see in very near future, this being a part of every single treatment tray, right? A part of the restorative tray, a part of the orthodontic tray, a part of the periodontic tray. Because you can diagnose early stage caries as a part of any other appointment. It could be any x-ray that you've taken for any other procedure, and you might spot an early stage caries lesion. So for me, that would be kind of the goal in my head, coming from a clinical background. There are times when you are treating the chief complaint, but you see so many other things in the mouth, and you wish you were treating that, because you have to see the dentition as a whole. It's one unit, right? We cannot focus on one tooth and forget the rest. So I see Curodont being a part of every single procedure, because it is a treatment that can be done within minutes, right? You don't have to have another appointment. You don't need to call your patient all over again. It can be done in 3 minutes, like Adri said. So that's what I see, a great future when it is accessible to every single patient that's out there, especially the underserved patients, but literally every single patient that's out there.
Adri, tell me a little bit about, integration with AI and things like that. Where do you see the future of this, both from the diagnostic side and the treatment side? Tell me a little bit about where you see this going.
Yeah, I definitely see it staying on the forefront of dentistry. With AI and the advanced diagnostic tools that providers have accessible to them now, early detection, again, is key. But as humans, we also have limitations with what we can see. And being able to utilize these advanced technologies like the cameras that use transillumination, where you can see primary caries on the interproximals, and the AI interpreted x rays that see the different shades of gray. By being able to utilize these advanced diagnostic tools, it's helping us be the best form of clinician that we can be. And being able to be that best clinician that we can be is setting up a better future for our patients.
I think we all envision a future where perhaps we can catch these lesions and not have to do nearly as much restorative. We can treat these underserved populations. We can help. That's the thing, is I think we all truly want to help our patients. We want to make sure that we are doing early intervention, that we're making sure that we're not doing anything, because it comes back to first do no harm. And if the restoration that we're doing is actually causing harm to the tooth and an attempt to fix it, that's not an ideal situation. This is such a great alternative to that, so that we can catch these things, we can treat them early. That is being reimbursed under a lot of insurers. Those who don't cover it are allowing for direct billing to the patients. Integration is a great service for the patient, which is a win-win for everyone in the dental community. And so I'm just so excited about this material, and I hope to see it just really come to the forefront. I'm still finding practices when I do my consulting that have never heard of Curodont. And so we want to get the word out. We want to make sure that people are aware of this as an option, as a treatment option, and that it is being integrated throughout all of dentistry. So thank you guys for joining me today. It's been a great opportunity to speak and learn a little bit about it all. Is there anything that either one of you want to say as we kind of close it out?
I would say that if there is any hesitancy for doctors, not sure if they want to integrate Curodont into their practice or not, I would just say, ask yourself, why not? It's not going to harm the tooth in any way. And being able to give your patients the option to treat early is what helps patients build trust with us as providers. So yeah, those are my final thoughts. Why not? Let's treat early.
Absolutely. Divya, how about you?
I think I would just say that Curodont is really answering a gap where there was no treatment that was available, right? You still have your prevention to do. And where a restoration is indicated, the traditional restoration with your composites or GIC or whatever, that is still there. Those cavitated lesions are still there. It is these lesions that we were not really addressing. That is where Curodont comes in. So it is, of course, a win-win for practices and patients, but also on like a higher level, right? You are treating disease that was being left untreated. I feel each of us can play a little part in trying to reduce this global burden that is affecting, 2.3 billion people. That number is mind-blowing, isn't it? And I feel once Curodont is integrated, you're really addressing every single stage of caries. You're addressing the caries before it begins, which would be prevention. You're addressing the early stage caries where Curodont comes in. And you would be addressing the cavitated lesions where, at least for now, your restorations come in. And you would be treating the whole spectrum of the caries disease. And I think that would be just the ideal situation.
That's fantastic perspective. Absolutely. Thank you both for joining me today. It's been a great conversation. I think we've all learned a lot about what Curodont is and where we're going with it and the opportunities that are available within your practice. I very much look forward to seeing this integrated into practices across the nation, making sure that we're going before there becomes an issue, before there becomes a larger problem, and treating these lesions that before we were just watching, that we were just kind of ignoring and letting grow. And so such a great opportunity with this new innovation. And thank you so much for being here and sharing this with our audience.
Thank you.
I appreciate
Thank
it,
you.
guys.